Hello friends! With the Procreate 5.4 update, there are now even more incredible default brushes to choose from, and we're going to explore some of them. In this video, I'm going to try Meadowbank. To find this brush, open the brush library, make sure you're in the Procreate library, go to the Pastel set, and Meadowbank is about halfway down the list. I haven't made any changes in the brush studio, and I'll be using the brush exactly as it was installed. I also have my canvas set to 4000 by 3000 pixels at 300 dpi. Before we dive in, I'd love if you'd like, comment, subscribe, and watch till the very end because it really helps the channel. Let's first take a look at the brush behaviors, and I'm going to test the stroke at different sizes. At the smallest size, the brush has an even grain pattern. You can clearly see the space between the grain, but it's compact and relatively uniform. And the line is fairly clean with crisp edges despite the texture. At a medium size, the grain is still compact and consistent, but it does get softer and more feathery along the edges. Now the stroke size gets really large with this brush, and the texture gets really soft. It kind of makes me think of cotton candy. It just feels light and wispy. I noticed a little bit of a taper when drawing those strokes, so let me test that. And yes, there is a slight taper. It's not huge, but you can see that the width of the stroke increases when more pressure is added. This, of course, means that the brush is also pressure sensitive. With light pressure, you see more texture, and the stroke becomes more solid with increased pressure. If I switch my grip and use the side of the pencil tip, the color is lighter and it's very grainy, but there's a slightly different texture to the grain. It's not as compact or as consistent as when you use a regular grip. I'm going to put down a few color swatches to test the opacity. And it looks like the brush is opaque and you can get pretty good coverage. Of course, some color will show through between the grain, but as long as you press down firmly, you can eliminate those gaps. Now let's switch to the smudge tool in the same brush to see how it blends. Okay, if the brush is at a large size, the grain remains if you give the smudge tool 1 or 2 passes, but it looks like you'll lose the texture pretty quickly if you keep blending. Doesn't look like it would be ideal for seamless gradient blends, but it might work well enough to soften the transition between two colors, kind of like smudging chalk. If you'd like to use this same process for testing your brushes, I made a brush testing worksheet for you. There's a link in the description for the free download. Okay, now let's test this brush on an actual drawing. Here's a quick peek at my sketching process, and I used the Huntsman pencil for this sketch in case you're curious. Let me just drop the opacity on that sketch and start adding color. I actually don't want the color on the fish to be too solid, so I'm going to try using a larger brush size and really light strokes so that the grain pattern really comes through. Since there's all that space in the grain pattern, it might create an interesting effect. Yeah, you can actually see some of that green peeking through. It's not a bad mix, actually. I pressed down a little harder than intended, so this lighter blue is showing up a little more opaque. I'm going to add a darker blue to that lavender to shift the color a bit and add some color to the tail. I'm going to layer a few different colors here too. Now I want the color on the head of the fish to be more solid, so I'm pressing down more firmly, which makes the grain a little less visible and the color more opaque. I'm going to take the same approach with this second fish. I'm just using slightly different colors. So again, light strokes to get lots of texture, and I'm layering several colors one over the other. Now I'm back to pressing down more firmly to get a solid color on the fins. I know it seems kind of counterintuitive to use opaque color since fins are usually translucent, but I don't want the colors below to show through. Then I can use the brush at a really small size to add an outline and a few details. Even though I'm pressing firmly, you can see that the texture is still very prominent when the brush is at a small size like this. I increased the size here and the texture is still there, but the lines don't look as choppy and broken up compared to the much smaller lines. Instead of drawing scales, I decided to add a few random organic strokes to add not exactly a pattern, but just some interesting detail. Same thing here. I'm keeping things pretty simple for the seaweed. Even when pressing firmly enough to get rich opaque color, the brush will still give you lots of really nice texture. And even though I'm layering colors, it has a completely different feel compared to when I was drawing the fish, since I'm keeping the colors opaque this time. Since these really thin lines get so choppy, I'm making a few passes to help them stand out a bit more. All right, I haven't done much with the smudge tool yet. I want the starfish to transition from pink in the center to orange at the tips. So let's see how that blends. Not too bad, actually. It really does give me chalk vibes. Let's see, I'm going to try blending the inside of the shell. I actually really like how that works. When I tested the brush behaviors earlier, it seemed like the blending might remove too much of the texture and it would look overly smooth and diffused, but I'm pleasantly surprised to see that it looks pretty natural. All right, a few details on the outer part of the shell. And since the stroke size can get so large, it makes it really easy to add textured color in the background. And I'm just going to add one last little pop of color. All right, my final thoughts on this brush. I'm not sure what kind of pastel this brush is meant to replicate, but to me, it feels much more like a chalk pastel versus an oil pastel. It worked better than I expected for layering colors, and it does a great job of sitting right in the middle in terms of opacity. Technically, it is an opaque brush, but depending on how you use it, you can get some nice effects when layering colors over one another. Color blending with the smudge tool also worked better than I expected, and overall, I was pleasantly surprised by this brush. I have used Meadowbank once before in this drawing tutorial, which I'll link to in the corner and in the description below, but I kept things really simple in that drawing, and I didn't push the brush to see what it was capable of. So I'm really glad I decided to review it because now I have a much better sense of what it can do. If you'd like to see more from this brush review series, there's a link to the playlist in the description. And if you enjoyed this video, remember to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. Thanks for watching.